Hello and welcome into another edition of New Track Record Podcast from the WELT studios, the Allen County Public Library here in Fort Wayne. Caleb Hatch, Justin Kinney with you. We'll be joined by a special guest shortly. Justin, what a week it has been in IndyCar.
Has it just been a week? It feels like multiple weeks since we last had a podcast, but plenty to talk to. We recorded one day too early.
Yes.
Last week.
Usually we're on the lucky side.
Right, usually we are, but last week was the exception. Lot to get to in this episode of the New Track Record Podcast. So looking forward to it.
So we mentioned a special guest, and joining us on the guest line, it is Adam Stern, motorsports reporter for Sports Business Journal. And Adam, you had the story early on, basically the night before, and then IndyCar officially announced that they are moving to Fox for a multi-year deal, all 17 races on network TV plus 2 Indy 500 qualifying windows on Fox. First off, Adam, thanks for coming on. It's always great to have you on to talk business stuff in motorsports. And this is essentially a home run deal for IndyCar in terms of exposure. How did this all come together?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I think IndyCar's been working on this for over a year at this point. They were consulting with Endeavor and IMG, who are seen as pretty much the best in terms of media consulting, or certainly one of the best, kind of in Hollywood and in sports. So this was something that they had been very deliberate on, and they've been working on for quite a while. That's kind of how these media rights deals work, is that because they're so tough to put together, they kind of schedule it where property like IndyCar usually has a year to a year and a half before its deal expires to kind of figure out its future. So obviously, NBC had extended for 3 years in 2021, for 2022 through 2024. So, last year in 2023, IndyCar was able to kind of start going to the market and figuring out what its future would be for 2025, its next cycle. And it seemed like it cast, as you would expect, a pretty wide net. Spoke to all of kind of the usual suspects, not just on the traditional side, but also on the streaming side. IndyCar is a sport that obviously is looking to continue to grow and continue to innovate. So you could have seen maybe a situation where it ended up on streaming, just like we've seen with, for example, MLS. MLS is almost exclusively now on streaming. But, yeah, ultimately the way it worked out for IndyCar, as we know in recent months, is it really came down to kind of more traditional partners. And it was really, it looked like in the end, NBC and Fox. And, of course, NBC being the incumbent. Obviously, I think IndyCar has, firstly, they've been with NBC for, 15, 16 years in various forms, going back to Versus in 2009, I think it was. So, this is a company they're deeply familiar with. Of course, NBC picked up the full exclusive rights in 2019, after they had been splitting it with ABC and ESPN. So I think IndyCar's executives, I think IndyCar's fan base, the whole industry at large was very comfortable with NBC. They've done a good job in recent years with making the Indy 500 feel like a big event. They've kind of promoted it during some big moments with their other sports. They've brought out all their top-tier talent, like your Mike Tiricos. Of course, they have a very kind of professional broadcast, and everyone loves, Lee Diffie and, the other folks. Of course, this year it was James and Townsend. So I think it was not easy to move on from NBC because they've done a really good job. But at the end of the day, IndyCar's ratings are doing well, but they're not doing amazing. They've kind of been growing steadily but surely. And IndyCar executives like Mark Miles will tell you that's what they want. But at the same time, obviously, we've seen kind of Formula One come in the United States in recent years, really make some headway, really start to grow its brand, its ratings, its media revenue. And so when you have a company like Fox come and they're offering to shake it up, and we don't know, we could talk more about this, but, it's yet to be reported exactly what Fox offered financially. But we know that IndyCar was saying that they were expecting to get an increase in their rights. So ultimately, the company they went to, we would have to assume was probably offering a better financial situation in some shape or form. And then, like you guys alluded to, you add in the fact that all of the races are going to be on Fox. It's kind of the old school way of doing it versus new school going to streaming. But I think it really works for IndyCar as a sport. It works for its fan base. It works for its teams. So ultimately, it seemed like Fox just put together too good of an offer for IndyCar to turn down.
When you look at the particulars, Adam, about this and the impetus of getting all of the races on network, which is something that NASCAR and Cup can't say. Xfinity can say it about CW. Formula One, of course, can't say it in North America. What led that? Was it Eric Shanks, the CEO of Fox Sports, aggressively offering that? Was it IndyCar putting it out there as a priority for them? How did we get to the point where we're heading into 2025 with every single race on Big Fox?
Yeah, based off of their press conference that they did virtually last week when they announced it, it seems like it was kind of more, IndyCar really pushing Fox on that. It doesn't seem like Fox necessarily had that as part of their original offer. So it seems like that was something that IndyCar really pushed on. And, credit to them for that. You're exactly right. No kind of top-tier motorsports series can say that. The only one that really can is kind of NASCAR's secondary series, the Xfinity series, which will be, of course, like you said, on the CW next year for every race. So it really does give IndyCar a nice calling card, a nice feather in its cap to be able to say, hey teams, you can now go pitch to your sponsors that we're the only sport that, motorsport that is going to have every event on network TV, free-to-air TV. And I'd like to say to people, sports is moving to streaming, just like TV is moving to streaming in general. And I think obviously by the 2030s, we're going to see more and more of everything moving to streaming. But, currently we're in 2024. And if you look at the NFL, for example, which of course is the biggest sport in America by far, really the biggest TV property in America by far, yeah, they're experimenting with streaming, but the vast majority of their content, of their games, still airs on free-to-air TV. So if it's good enough for the NFL, it's good enough for everyone else, and it's good enough for, in this case, IndyCar. And so my point is that there's definitely still a lot of benefits to being on free-to-air TV, even in this day and age where so much of kind of like the media talk, so many articles, so many podcasts like this one, et cetera, are going to be talking about streaming and how things are moving to streaming. Yeah, we're not fully there yet. It's still a pretty good time to be on free-to-air TV. And so, like you mentioned, for IndyCar to be the only major motorsports series that is top-tier series, has every event on that broadcast network, it goes to show why Eric Shanks, the CEO of Fox Sports, was saying that he was getting a lot of texts from IndyCar team owners that day saying, let's effing go, because they were apparently very excited about this deal. So, yeah, it does seem like a job well done by IndyCar. Again, we'll have to see what comes out in due course about the financials. We can only assume at this point, given what they kind of telegraphed, that it's a better deal financially than what they're getting from NBC. So it seems like a good deal all around. And, yeah, you got to give them credit because it's not an easy time to be getting a better TV deal. Everyone just assumes that TV deals are always going to be going up and more money is going to be for every sports property, but that's not really the case. The TV market is quite challenged right now with cord cutting and this transition to streaming, which is proving to be hugely expensive. And a lot of the companies that are investing are not profitable yet, and they're being pushed for profitability. So it's a very complicated time. It's part of why NASCAR's TV deal took longer. It's part of why NASCAR got an increase, but not as big of an increase as they were hoping for. So it's not something that you should just take for granted that IndyCar is able to get a good deal. You do have to give them credit.
Adam, how much of a role does it help that Eric Shanks, the Fox Sports CEO, is from Brazil, Indiana, and really championed IndyCar to Fox Sports as a whole?
Yeah, he was. I think he was asked about that. I mean, I think, look, obviously the fact that he has been, I think he said as a fan, he's been to the Indy 500 more than any other sporting event. So it's hard to imagine that hurts. I've heard many times, whether it's privately or even in some on-the-record interviews with various people in sports business over the years, who will admit how much personal relationships matter and sometimes how much even personal preferences matter in really big deals across motorsports, sports, business, etc. You'll have situations where a CEO will have two kids and their kid will like something, and next thing you know, lo and behold, that CEO is doing a deal in that space. So things like that do matter. It doesn't mean that, IndyCar and Fox, it doesn't mean that Fox only did this deal because Eric Shanks is from Indiana. That's certainly not the case. It wouldn't be the case on so many levels. It couldn't be the case on so many levels. So it's definitely not that simple. But can it help around the margins? It certainly can. And yeah, I know, for example, Eric Shanks wasn't at the Indy 500 this year, but I think he was kind of saying, hey, I might be at it next year. And that was something he was saying, weeks ago. So obviously this was a deal they were setting up for quite some time. I know Shanks had said that Jonathan Gibson from IndyCar and Jordan Bazant from Fox Sports were kind of the two key executives. And he described them as being locked at the hip in recent months to set this up. So it's kind of interesting because, of course, and I really do think NBC was in it till the end, but it looks like while NBC was in it to the end, IndyCar did have an idea for quite some time, at least many weeks, if not a couple months, that they thought Fox might be the better option. So, yeah, part of that, I'm sure, is the fact that they were, familiar with Eric Shanks. He's been to many Indy 500s before. And so, yeah, the fact that he's a Hoosier, it seems like it's tough that could, hurt when you're talking about a series based in Indiana and Indianapolis.
I know some people were disappointed or are disappointed with this development and how it affects streaming access, and Peacock being $5-6. You can get it for $1 a month when they have special deals. Well, Adam, we've talked so much about streaming being the future, but was IndyCar a bit too ahead of the game in terms of its streaming presence, with all of its qualifying and all of its practice on stream and races on stream and its top junior series all on stream? Because while it was beneficial to the people that had Peacock, it was not beneficial in terms of the access that people had to the sport. And we talk about eyes on product and how important is that. It was some of this, as convenient as Peacock was IndyCar just a bit ahead in terms of putting so much on stream and now having to go back, and some people upset about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it to me, I wouldn't so much term it as they were too far ahead. What I would just say is it reflects the chaotic nature right now of the media business and how you have companies with different priorities. So, Fox is kind of, infamously known right now in the media space as the company that hasn't gone all in on streaming. And by the way, they've started to look really smart for it because, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, the media companies that have gone all in on streaming, they're spending so much money on it, and they're really not profitable yet. And Wall Street has started to take a, unfavorable look upon that. So, Fox just has different priorities, and they've kind of done something very smart to a certain degree or from a certain perspective, which is they've let a lot of these other media companies develop the technology for streaming. And now, for example, the streaming option for IndyCar is going to be on this Venue Sports, which is part of the, joint venture between Fox Sports, ESPN, and Warner Brothers Discovery. So ESPN has spent a ton of money on streaming, and Warner Brothers Discovery has spent a ton of money on streaming, and now they're going to team up with IndyCar, or it's not with IndyCar, with Fox Sports, where IndyCar will be available on. And so it's just kind of the way that the cookie has crumbled to a certain degree. But you're exactly right in bringing up that this, is one of the kind of ramifications of the deal that will have to be dealt with. It does appear like there's going to be, understandably, some fans who are not necessarily thrilled with the fact that they had Peacock for, I think you mentioned, like you said, $5-6 a month, and this Venue Sports is set to be, potentially well into, $20, $30, $40 a month. So it's going to be a lot more. And that is a difference. I think, it speaks to, again, the broader kind of chaos we're seeing right now in the media space and with streaming companies. You're seeing more and more kind of social media chatter from people saying like, wow, I have 5 different streaming networks that I'm subscribed to now. This almost feels like cable. Like, should we just go back to cable? So it just kind of speaks to how there's, different companies with different priorities and how these deals, when they change hands, it can really affect the fans. But I will say, to your point as well, having, for example, Indy Next on linear TV, in certain regards, that's fantastic. I mean, I don't, outside of the Freedom 500, I don't really remember Indy Next, or, obviously previously Indy Lights ever being on TV, at least during my time covering racing back to 2015. So things like that are another reason why this seems to be a good deal for Fox. The kind of junior, or for IndyCar, now the junior series is going to get more exposure than it really has, because, it's certainly convenient for the hardcore fans to have series like that on a streaming network for $5-6 a month, but the eyeballs are going to be a lot less than putting it on, for example, an FS1. So it's just kind of the way the cookie has crumbled, and it will be something that IndyCar has to deal with to kind of help their fans figure out the best possible options and try and get them to not be mad. If they are mad, try and work with them to figure out as much as possible. But there will be some changes.
Adam, obviously the team owners for IndyCar rightly thrilled with the eyes on product aspect of this all-network TV deal. Behind the scenes, is there any kind of number or goal in place for 2025 that IndyCar has in terms of the percentage of increase in viewership? We've seen a lot of years where it's 1, 2, 3%. Is it double digit or bust now with this kind of TV deal?
I haven't heard, but to your point, I think, look, the reality is that when you get all the races, when you have more events on network TV, your ratings are going to go up. It's part of the reason why, you to a certain degree have to kind of separate the broadcast window from like how the series is doing overall in terms of like growing with star power, because, if you go from cable to network, you're naturally going to have an increase. So you can't give a series, for example, too much credit for growing if they got just better windows. You can give them credit from a scheduling perspective, but you can't say, they have a bunch of new superstars that are driving these increases. So, look, their ratings are definitely going to go up as part of this, you would think. The only kind of caveat is that, there's less and less people watching cable. So kind of the household using television metric, which is called HUT, is going down. But you would think, at least from a ratings perspective, that they're going to go up. Viewership, we'll see. They're kind of related but slightly different. But, there's still enough people watching where, yes, I would imagine with these being kind of, with there being contractually set more events that are going to be on broadcast, their ratings are going to go up. But at the same time, if you're IndyCar, you can't just bank on that, because, again, that's going to happen to any sports property if you go from cable to network. The more important thing they need to worry about is just continuing to grow as a property. And, if they have more people that are interested in the drivers of the series, in the schedule of the series, the places they're going to, that's what they really need to be focusing on in terms of trying to drive increases. Because, to your point, they are going to get a small, at least minimum, natural increase from going from having more on broadcast. But, if you're IndyCar, you can't just rest on your laurels with that.
Adam, when you look at ratings and maybe what that magic tipping point number is, I guess, that opens up opportunities, or what potential sponsors and businesses and companies and organizations are looking for, is it that million? Is it that magic million that you'd like to see in terms of an average? What really kind of would tip the scales and really open the doors for teams in the series in terms of average viewers? Because we here at the podcast always point to that magic million. Is that too simple of an equation, or do you look at that number as a big factor?
Well, look, I mean, on one hand, it's too simple, but on the other hand, numbers do have a psychological impact, and there are certain thresholds that you want to hit. And so I do think it's important that IndyCar tries to get to closer to 1 million for every race. I wouldn't totally discount that. At the same time, it's not always that simple. There's a lot of different factors. So, for example, we were talking about this in our office a couple of days ago. One of the factors that teams are having to deal with in motorsports now as they try and sell sponsorship is how much other inventory is now in the market from other stick and ball teams that used to not have sponsorship in the field of play. So, for example, we just saw last week, we may now have the first ever example of a major college conference selling their naming rights. The Big 12 is looking at selling their naming rights apparently to Allstate and changing their name to the Allstate 12. By the way, the guy setting that up Brett Yormark, a former NASCAR COO who was with NASCAR in their heyday, and he did amazing deals back then. So probably not a coincidence to a certain degree, but things like that can have an impact as well. So it's never quite as simple as, hey, if you hit this number, then every major company on earth is going to sign up. At the same time, again, numbers do matter and can have a psychological impact at certain thresholds. So I do think it would be great if IndyCar's teams could go out to the market and say, yeah, worst case scenario, you're going to have 1 million viewers. Like, that would be better, And so I know, for example, in NASCAR, I've spoken to some people before who said they've spoken to brands who have said, we're not, major blue chip brands who have said, we're not going to come back into NASCAR until they average 5 million viewers a race. And right now they're kind of at like 3.3. And so they may never get back to 5. And hopefully they will. But if they don't, it might be tough to get huge brands back in certain regards. So that plays to your point about how certain numbers are important to brands. And, I don't know exactly what that number is to every team, but I do think, that nice round 1 million number certainly is a good place to start about where you'd like to be at a minimum.
Adam, another aspect in all of this is that IndyCar announced a schedule for a season before the season was even complete, which is a rarity. I can't think of
before NASCAR even. When's the last time that happened?
I can't think of the last time that happened. So you look at the schedule and not a whole lot of changes. Milwaukee goes down to 1 race, not a big surprise. I think the big surprise addition is that Thermal is back on the schedule, this time as a points-paying race. Not a whole lot of information in terms of Thermal and what they plan to do and how do they plan to accommodate spectators, but what are maybe some other tracks that were close but didn't quite make the cut?
Well, that's what's interesting is I think to your point about, this coming out early, this coming out before NASCAR, it's a double-edged sword, guys, because, it's great. It truly is great for fans to get to plan early. We know that's legitimately a good thing. However, kind of the bad part is part of the reason it came out early is they didn't have to work on anything that new, and there's really no new events for next year. And, we see NASCAR switching up their schedule and adding the Chicago street race and things like that. And so, look, of course, Thermal was new this year, of course, and it'll be kind of new next year in terms of being a points race. But, I'm not sure there were a ton of tracks that were really close to being added for next year. When you hear Mark Miles talk, he says that, and this goes back to, I think, 2 months ago was the first time I heard him mention this, that, they're really putting their attention towards 2026 for new events. So, what exactly happened with Texas, I think might be one of the main questions to your point about, were there some other tracks in the mix for 2025? Because we know, of course, that Texas was removed for 2024. But, last year when they announced that, they said, hey, maybe we'll look to get it back for 2025. That clearly didn't happen. I don't know exactly the answer to that question yet, but that will be one to try and unpack over the coming couple of weeks here about why IndyCar wasn't able to get back to Texas. But that being said, the real big events that they're apparently planning for that are brand new, for months they've known weren't going to be for 2025, and that for one reason or the other were kind of so big that had to take till 2026. They've described them as, without getting specific about where it is, that it's, major urban settings. So, clearly it doesn't appear like they're looking to do, whatever these new events are for 2026, doesn't sound like they're kind of permanent tracks on the outskirts of town, like we see with so many of these, like a Homestead, et cetera. So it sounds like, clearly it sounds like a street race. And it'll be really interesting to see where they're looking at. Clearly IndyCar has some big gaps on the East Coast, especially after having dropped Pocono. At the same time, they're no longer in Texas, which has Texas has a GDP of some other countries. It's a huge state. So, I think it's a great thing that IndyCar was able to kind of do that 1-2 punch with getting the media rights deal on the schedule at the same time. But, part of what made it easier for them is that they didn't have really huge changes for 2025.
Well, in IndyCar, we know is notorious for teasing something down the road, and then it just continues to get kicked down the road. We look at hybrids that will unveil at Mid Ohio as a prime example. But Adam, when you look at two of the things we always talk about here, international races and third OEM, let's talk about a second OEM and Honda in particular. The goals for IndyCar, once they started taking Honda's threats, I guess, seriously, was lowering costs. And is there any update on potential progress with that, whether they go to a spec engine? Does the move to Fox and all network races help considerably in terms of Fox wanting to stay in the series? What have you heard about Honda's opinions of the latest news and what IndyCar is doing to try to appease their OEM?
Great questions. I don't have all necessarily, I'd say, like the latest info in terms of I haven't heard yet, for example, even though it is a great question and I wish I had heard. I don't know, for example, Honda's reaction yet to the Fox deal, for example. But what I will say is, generally speaking, in recent months, there's been very legitimate, genuine, serious worry about the idea that Honda could leave IndyCar. So, you know, is IndyCar doing things to try to address that and try and make sure that doesn't happen? Absolutely. We know that, you know, some of how we know that is not just from my sources, it's from other great reporters like Marshall Pruitt, who have done a lot of reporting about, you know, what IndyCar is looking at doing for, you know, the new car that they're trying for in 2027 and how that could maybe be a little bit more spec-ish as Honda appeared to request. So I think these are all great questions, and I would love to have the answers about, hey, how do they feel, you know, that all the races are going to be on broadcast, things like that. Of course, we do know they kind of, you know, got their butt whooped at the month of May. So I don't know if that was, you know, necessarily the best timing, but it kind of is what it is. You know, you got to give credit to Chevrolet for having a great engine and great package, of course, at Indy. So, yeah, I think really all I can say is that there's been very legitimate, genuine worry that Honda could leave IndyCar in the coming couple years. And we know NASCAR is working very hard to try and get Honda at the same time. And so, yeah, hopefully they'll be able to work it out. I don't think it's really good. It'd be good for IndyCar to see Honda leave. So I hope for IndyCar's sake that they're able to work it out. But I have yet to hear kind of anyone say like, hey, I'm feeling really good about the situation. That doesn't mean that they won't work it out, but it just means that, you know, clearly IndyCar has a lot of work they've had to do in recent months, and will have to continue to do probably in the coming couple months to try and salvage this relationship. And yeah, obviously it couldn't be more crucial. I mean, it'd be tough to think of IndyCar just being a one OEM series.
Adam, before we let you go, there was two elements that people were upset with this deal. One, of course, Peacock going away in the streaming element. The other is just simply how Fox handles NASCAR races, and will that carry over to IndyCar? We know that IMS Productions is going to handle a lot of that aspect, so that should alleviate some concerns. And the other is just the NASCARification of the broadcast. I don't think Fox is going to present it that way, but are there a lot of IndyCar current talent on NBC that we should expect to be moving over to Fox to cover IndyCar?
I think it's going to be a mix. So I definitely think there's going to be, you know, some Fox talent or kind of former Fox talent that will probably be part of the mix. For example, we know Jamie Little has long had connections to IndyCar racing and the Indy 500. So probably wouldn't be a surprise to see her be, for example, like a pit reporter. But yeah, I would certainly imagine that there's going to be some external hires. You know, Lee Diffie, it seems like he's kind of got a really good thing going with NBC. You know, he does more than just motorsports for them. He's obviously huge with their Olympics and things like that. So I don't know this for a fact. This is somewhat speculation, but I'd be surprised if Lee Diffie comes over. But I think when you look at a James Hinchcliffe or a Townsend Bell, not necessarily saying both of them will, but probably be surprising if neither of them came over. You know, you'd probably expect at least one of them, I would think, to join the booth. And, yeah, obviously, if it's not Lee Diffie, then it'll be really interesting to see what they do kind of for the lead play-by-play guy. Of course, you know, we've seen the speculation and other reports in recent months about the possibility of Adam Alexander. You know, but at the same time, he could possibly move on from Fox and kind of his name has been linked as possibly going to the CW and calling the Xfinity Series, for NASCAR and the CW. So I haven't heard definitively yet who will be the play-by-play guy, but it'll be really interesting to see, if they kind of go internal there or if they bring like an Alan Bestwick out of the bullpen. So my guess is it'll be a mixture of the two. And, I'm certainly looking forward to trying to report who that's going to be. It'll be really interesting to see.
Adam, as always, appreciate the time. Always enjoy chatting with you, and we'll look forward to reading your report, Sports Business Journal, online, and then also when more IndyCar business news breaks, of course, we'll be happy to have you on again.
Hey, it was a lot of fun, guys. Thank you so much.
Adam Stern, Sports Business Journal, motorsports reporter, joining us. Always great to have Adam on, and there are so many aspects of this TV deal, and we have so much to get to. We have the TV deal, plus the schedule, plus Canapino returning to Juncos Hollinger for the rest of the season.
Plus our weekly McLaren driver change.
Theo Pourchaire out and Nolan Siegel in at McLaren. Oh, and we have a race this weekend, a brief race preview as well. Final hybrid race. There's just so much happening in IndyCar in the last week.
So much to get to. And I felt like the biggest thing, maybe the biggest thing for me when talking to Adam Stern and people that are upset about IndyCar going off Peacock is 2-3 years ago, we were talking about streaming is the future. And it still is, but it's just not there yet. The money isn't there in streaming in terms of being paid. Like NFL is one thing, getting paid a crazy amount of money to be on stream with games and a playoff game and all that stuff. But the money isn't there yet for IndyCar on stream. And this is, and Marshall Pruitt wrote a great article last week that we posted on our social media channels and said, hey, this is why this is such a great deal. Individually, you may be screwed over. Instead of paying $5 a month, you now have to pay $25 a month or something.
A lot more than that. But I'll get to all the alternatives.
True, which you put together a good thread about that as well. But it's like, look, if you just want to watch IndyCar, you don't, and that's maybe the thing is we hear from a lot of diehards that want to watch quals and all that stuff. Let's take the casual fan. You don't need USA to watch races. You don't need Peacock to watch a race or two. You don't even need cable. You just have Fox. And so, there are individual people that are like, this stinks. But overall, it is such a win for the series that, quite frankly, it's like, you piss off the minority to expose the sport to so many more people.
Yeah, I think the ultimate thing why I view this TV deal as such a massive win, let's just put it this way. Think about where IndyCar was at 15 years ago when they signed the Versus deal, a channel that most people had never heard of. And now, in 2024, 15 years later, everyone knows Fox, right?
Right.
Fox has the Super Bowl this year. They have the Daytona 500 and the Indy 500. Think about the cross-promotion there for that alone, for the Indy 500 and the series as a whole. That's super helpful, right? And they will mention the Indy 500, I'm sure, at least once during the Super Bowl. They'll mention Daytona.
Oh, for sure.
They say, now that Fox, you're home for the Daytona 500 and the Indy 500.
I mean, they always tease Daytona
correct
during NFL playoffs because that's the next big event that's coming up outside of if Fox has the Super Bowl.
So this is such a massive win for the series. It's such a massive win for the teams and their ability to market themselves. 2 races on Peacock is a killer for the teams this year.
And we still don't know what the streaming options are going to be.
Yeah, we don't know the full details.
Right.
Now, what's been reported out there, and it's all unofficial, we know that venue sports will be an aspect of that, and we expect that cost to be $40 to $50 a month. But again, that includes all the ESPN networks that you need, includes Warner Brothers Discovery, so like TNT Sports if you're a sports fan, TNT, TBS, True TV, so you have the NCAA tournament covered.
Right.
You just need an antenna.
All college
CBS,
football, college
football, college basketball,
NHL, NBA, all that stuff.
Yeah. So, and then, well, not NBA because of whatever the reported NBC deal is, which we think is
that's
Peacock
true. NBC's
heavy.
not part of the venue.
But overall, I mean, this is such a huge, huge win for IndyCar, for growing fans, right, and growing the sport. And I get that people who had that great deal with Peacock are upset. I understand it. I mean, we have Peacock for free right now through our Instacart membership. It's like, great, cool. So we don't have to pay for this the rest of the year. And I was already using the Black Friday deal, which was like $2 a month. So easy money to save. But, and I'll run through all the alternatives on how to watch compared to if you were just a Peacock watcher. I get that is the future. We've never denied that, but we're not ready for that. And Adam kind of alluded to this, but these networks have lost so much money. NBC has lost so much money on Peacock. And Q1 was, I saw a report out today, Q1 was another quarter of heavy losses for streaming services. Q2, they expect a little bit of a rebound. NBC's heavily promoting Peacock and all their properties because of the Olympics coming up in Paris next month. But streaming doesn't pay the bills yet. Will it in 5 to 10 years? Yes.
Probably, yeah. But it's like, you look at it, that's why there's all these streaming bundles out there, because streaming services are desperate to get people to watch their product, and they're throwing stupid money at programming to try to get people to have to buy it. Look at Amazon and what they threw at the NFL. And you're looking at Paramount maybe being sold off. Paramount Plus has not brought in the money that they wanted to. So it's not there yet. I kind of look at it like the automobile industry is. Everybody knows eventually there's going to be some sort of alternative powered vehicles. Oil is going to run out at some point. Everybody sees it, but still the money is in internal combustion engines. We're seeing what Toyota kind of back away from their commitment to all hybrid technology and stuff in their street cars because we're just not there yet. Everybody knows it's coming.
You mean all electric?
All electric, yeah. But everybody knows it's coming at some point. But we're seeing a topping off of the alternative energies, the electric and stuff like that, because everybody who's wanted one has gotten one. So you're kind of topping off at about 10% of alternative energy cars. That means 90% are still internal combustion engines or a hybrid technology of some sort. And that's kind of where you are with streaming. We all know that's where the entertainment is going, but it's not there yet. And the big money, the bulk of the big money, particularly with live sports, is still straight over the air.
And live sports are not quite a guarantee, but the safest bet you can have for programming on your network to ensure ratings and viewership and advertisers and all that kind of thing. So this, in a weird way, proves the value of IndyCar to a network.
It does. I mean,
so
look at it.
It's a massive win.
Fox is looking at IndyCar as an investment to get more viewers onto Fox. And we know all about cost or cord cutting and all that stuff. And Fox is looking at it and saying, this is going to help our sports profile. Fox wanted IndyCar, and they made an offer that was exceptionally better than anything we've seen in recent memory. How over the moon were we when IndyCar went to NBC initially?
It was big,
and had 13 races on. That was huge. This blows it out of the water, because not only do you have every race on Fox, you have every qualifying and practice session on either FS1 and FS2, and you put Indy Lights, Indy Next on FS1. It is an absolute home run. Now it is the job of both Fox Sports and IndyCar to make it work, to raise the profile, raise the eyes on product considerably starting in 2025.
And if you're someone who watched exclusively on Peacock and you're upset, I get it, but this is for the good of the entire sport and for the good of the series. And there are a lot of alternative ways that you can watch. First off, you can still watch every race on Fox. All you need is an antenna to plug it into your TV. They generally run $20 to $30 for a solid antenna. I know there are people who are in outlying areas where their antenna doesn't get Fox or whatever. I have other alternatives to help you out. But if you want to watch every race, all you need is an antenna. You don't need a cable package. Hey, Gen Z, you don't need a cable package. No. Millennials, you don't need a cable package if you want to watch every single IndyCar race.
It's the classic Farmers 5, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's step one. Step two, if you want to continue streaming and you're a sports fan, Venue Sports is going to be for you. I get that it's going to be high in cost compared to Peacock. Probably $40 to $50 a month. All the ESPN networks, TNT, TBS, True TV, obviously Fox and Fox Sports 1, Fox Sports 2. I mean, you basically, if you're a sports fan, you're pretty much set. The only exception is you'd probably still want Peacock in an antenna to get NBC and CBS to cover everything else. But you're not really missing. This is essentially 75% of sports properties that you want to watch in America. So that's number 2. Number 3, and this is the one that a lot of people pointed out. If you're upset about the pricing of venue sports, simple: get a VPN. Set your country to, for example, Singapore, and I posted this on our thread.
So how do people get a VPN?
So you go online, you look up VPNs. There are lots of different VPNs, and it's virtual private network. And so if you're like worried about, what does this mean? Let's just put it this way: if you work for a company and you have access to a company laptop, it most likely has a VPN on it. So it's not some scary thing that's, dark
illegal,
web or whatever.
Yeah, this is not dark web stuff.
This is legal. Okay, so you get a VPN. And to be clear, I don't know how much a VPN costs. I don't use a VPN on my personal laptop. But I don't think it's like a large cost. Then IndyCar Live exists. So if
it's about $30-$40 for
and that's
like
a one-time
Norton secure.
That's a
VPN.
one-time cost, right? Not a monthly cost?
Correct.
Okay. So essentially, instead of getting an antenna, or say you already have an antenna and you want to watch the other sessions, it's around the same cost. So then you set your country to somewhere that doesn't have an IndyCar TV package. Someone posed Singapore as an example. That's what they set it to. You can get IndyCar Live. It's like $5 for all the or $5 a month for like all the sessions. You can do 10 if you want to include the series formerly known as Indy Lights and all that. So you're set there. If you're not interested in practicing qualifying and you don't want to pay for a cable package, you don't have an antenna, it's easy. You can go, and I used to do this for races on Versus all the time. Go to a restaurant or bar that has TVs. They will have Fox. You can watch the race there. If that's not an option for you, you can also get YouTube TV, which Justin and I both have now. He finally made the switch. He joined our group.
Yeah, I have been assimilated into the
we
YouTube
pay
TV.
$18 a month, split 4 ways. And this is legal. YouTube TV allows family sharing. You can have, it's either up to 4 or 6 people on your family group plan. So if you can split it with your friends or family, you can go from there. But again, we have it split 4 ways, $18 a month. Now, there is like a 3-screen in-use limit or whatever. But again, if you have that, you can watch all your practice and qualifying. You have an antenna. You can watch every race. I watch races on antenna anyway. It's more live than watching on stream, which is like 30 seconds behind usually.
True.
And it's better picture quality. That's the other aspect. So, and if all those options aren't good enough for you and you're not attending the race, I don't know how to help you. I feel like I covered all of them.
We're giving you options.
Am I missing anything here?
No, and in the end, look, whatever you decide to do, you're investing in the series. We talk about going to races to invest in the series. This is an indirect way to invest in this. How important is IndyCar to you? Because we've seen people post, well, I'm not going to watch IndyCar anymore. How big of a fan were you then? If this is going to keep you from watching IndyCar, if this is all of a sudden the end all.
And I know people are like, well, I can't DVR on antenna. And a lot of people pointed out, well, TiVo still exists. You can buy a TiVo. They usually have a Black Friday deal.
Right.
So that's a way to do that.
The only thing that I'm hoping that the either venue or whatever other stream is it's very convenient to go on Peacock and say if there was a weather delayed race, and I love not watching races live, or it has to switch over to another channel or whatever, it's all in one tidy place.
Well, and YouTube TV season records. So if you season record IndyCar, not only will it record every race, but you don't have to worry about like adding a half hour, an hour to make sure you don't miss like the end of a delayed race. Yeah, it keeps going. So you have no issues, whether it's the Indy 500 or whatever. Like there's no issue with the weather delay for me on being able to watch that. So overall, there are a lot of options. We've come a long way from 5 races on ABC, the rest on Versus, streaming practice and qualifying on YouTube, to NBC Sports Gold, to Peacock, ABC, 5 races, and NBC Sports Network, then NBCSN as they rebranded, to now NBC, USA, and Peacock, to now just everything on Fox. Like, it's so simple.
It's so easy. I totally forgot about NBC Sports Gold too.
Yeah, right.
Mentioned that a couple days
now
ago.
the schedule, on the other hand, I mean, there aren't a lot of changes. Thermal's an official race. We don't have enough details to really look. I will be curious what they do. I'll be curious if they add safer barriers. I will be curious what the layout is. I'll be curious how they have fans, but we just don't have a lot of information yet. The other changes on the schedule, because there aren't many, you have Gateway moving to mid-June. It's the first oval after the Indy 500. Tells me their NASCAR race, which is normally the first weekend in June, is moving. You're only going to have one night race, that being Iowa Race 1 on July 12th. So that's a downside. And you're back at Nashville Super Speedway, Milwaukee Mile down to one race, August 24th, again on a Sunday. And then Nashville, the finale, August 31st. So Labor Day weekend. Hopefully that's maybe that's a nighttime race. You have college football probably during the day with their Big Ten agreement that Fox has here in the U.S.
I don't know if Fox they have a primetime Friday game. I don't think they have a primetime Saturday game, right?
Well, no, this would be on a Sunday. So maybe they do a Sunday afternoon game, and then you local news, and then at 7 o'clock you go to the...
Yeah.
And the windows are shorter, right? 2.5 hours, Indy 500 to 5-hour window. So you're going to have short pre-races, which I love.
Yeah, you're a fan of the short pre-races.
With IMS Productions, with likely some of the Fox talent staying and some of the current NBC talent, we know Lee Diffie's not moving. He's switching to NASCAR, we believe, after the Olympics. But all in all, I mean, this is a massive, massive win.
It is, and I think one thing that I look at with what we put out on Twitter is, what was your favorite and least favorite part of the new schedule? And so many people said thermal, and I was their least favorite. And like, well, if you're going there, you may as well make it a points race anyway. So that was kind of my thing, and then we posted like, well, what's your beef with thermal? And most people said the exclusivity of it. Yeah, I get it. But at the same time, does it bother me that one of the 18 races now next season will be, 17, because they made it just one race, right, at Milwaukee next year?
Yeah.
So still 17 race schedule, is if you're going somewhere. And what was the feedback coming out of thermal? It was just they tried to hype it up into a big event, and it just wasn't. So I'm perfectly fine with making it a points race. Just make it another race. There may be significantly less fans there, but hey, it's just like racing at California or something Speedway, right? When nobody showed up. So, or Sonoma for that reason, for that matter. So I have no problem with thermal. I know other people do, but for me, if you're going to be there, you may as well make it a points race. IndyCar continues. Mark Miles continues to say that 2026 schedule is the one that's going to be potentially different in terms of new events. I'll believe it when I see it. But as for 2025, I'm fine with it. Yeah, there's gaps, but you need two to tango. We talked to Adam Stern about Texas, and Marshall Pruitt mentioned it in this week's mailbag. IndyCar wanted to go back to Texas this year, Texas Motor Speedway. Texas Motor Speedway said, we don't want you. So every week you have people on social media or the mailbag going, why isn't IndyCar here? What have they thought about going here, there, anywhere? If IndyCar was wanted, they would be going somewhere. And right now there's no races in Texas. COTA doesn't want them. Texas Motor Speedway doesn't want them. There's talk about a San Antonio street race. Who knows if that happens or not. But in terms of 2026, we'll see what happens there. 2025, though, just amazed and that they have the schedule out this early. Yes, it's not dramatically different, but the fact that it's going to be on Fox is going to bring some sort of newness to the 2025 season.
And to me, and this sums it up, and this is from Beyond the Flag, NASCAR's 38-race 2025 schedule has a total of 9 races on Fox or NBC, 5 out of the 14 on Fox. The rest are on FS1.
Crazy?
That's crazy. And then IndyCar's 17-race 2025 schedule has 17 races on Fox. So that's what sums it up for me, is that IndyCar is getting maximum exposure. This is so big for the sport and for everything and part of it. Now they just have to take advantage of it.
And we've heard from numerous team owners, praising Roger Penske, praising IndyCar, praising Fox Sports, all for stepping up and making this happen. This could really be, we're not talking about a return to the glory days of the late 80s, early 90s here, but could IndyCar make a jump considerable, like similar to Formula One in terms of ratings in the United States, consistently over 1 million, going up to 1.5 million sometimes? I mean, that would be tremendous for IndyCar. I don't hold any delusions that IndyCar is going to get back to what it was or rival NASCAR for ratings anytime soon. But could they get into that 1 million, 1.5 million range per race? That would be tremendous.
So that's the good. Let's move on to the bad. And silly season for 2024 continues. First off, I guess the good news is that Agustin Canapino, to my shock, I'm very surprised by this. But
that's good news?
I hope.
Yeah.
I like to think it's good news. But he will finish out the season with Juncos Hollinger in the 78 car. So that was confirmed last week, right when we thought Nolan Siegel would be the guy. Clearly, that didn't work out because, well, he found himself another ride. He will be in the formerly Theo Pourchaire entry at Aero McLaren in the 6 car. Now the 6th name to either drive or be attached to the 6 car in the past year. So you have Felix Rosenquist, who was the full-time driver for that last year. You started this year with David Malukas. He never drove in a race. You've had Callum Ilott, who did a few races. Obviously, Theo Pourchaire
did 5.
And then, who am I forgetting? Nolan Siegel. Oh, and then the 6th name. This is who I'm forgetting. Alex Palou, who's originally supposed to be in that seat, right?
Correct.
So they've gone from Alex Palou to Nolan Siegel, who is a talented, young, up-and-coming IndyCar driver. Now, he's not a finished product, but they went from having a 2-time series champion to a rookie. And for all the talk about Aero McLaren and everything, this just kind of tells you how much that Palou backing out really screwed over this team. Because that's ultimately what this comes down to. Nolan Siegel has the potential to be really good. He won in his class at Le Mans, driving for Zach Brown's United Autosports team. Now, granted, they had a ringer in Oliver Jarvis, as a lot of people have pointed out on a tweet that we've had.
Yeah, he's one of 3 drivers that was in that seat.
So, but he's talented, and when you have the opportunity, yeah, of course you take it. Now, do you kind of wonder, like, does he actually finish out this season and run the full season next year? I don't know. I mean, we do know that his dad brings a lot of money to the table.
A lot of money.
Now, it's fine. Like, it's one thing to be a driver who just brings a massive check and has zero talent. I don't think anyone's questioning Siegel's talent here. That's not what's at issue. It's more that this feels like more of a risk by McLaren and another quick decision. I hope Theo Pourchaire finds another ride. He has expressed interest in staying in IndyCar. You wonder if he could end up at Prima as they enter next season. Possibly. Who knows? But just a really bizarre situation, and Tony Kanaan, who's their sporting director, really kind of put himself on the line here with this move. We'll see if it pays off.
Yeah, just so many different angles of this with Nolan Siegel, and we put a tweet out there a couple days ago that just blew up across our Twitter machine. It basically kind of laid it out. Is we're not doubting Nolan Siegel's potential to be a really good IndyCar driver. Okay? He's 19 years old. He's never finished above 3rd in any series he has been in. He very well could have won the Indy Lights Championship this year if he would have stayed in the field, of which he's no longer is, of course. But this is a 19-year-old kid that has a lot of learning to do. And when you look at McLaren's impatience with finding basically a 1B to Pato Award, because Alexander Rossi isn't it. And there's questions on whether he'll be replaced at the end of the year. But
he's a free agent at the end of the season.
I know that Zach Brown has said that they were comfortable with their top 2, but he also had kind things to said about Theo Pourchaire. But so who the hell knows what's going on with Zach Brown from day to day. But Does anyone believe that impatient McLaren is going to ride out the struggles of Nolan Siegel as he customizes himself to IndyCar? They didn't with Callum Ilott.
Well, that one is more due to Callum Ilott's WEC schedule getting in the way. But you thought that Ilott would be a prime candidate for a full-time ride next season.
But why not Callum Ilott? I would say, other than money, and then that's maybe the great equalizer, and I keep kind of shrugging off. It's McLaren. Do they really need the money? Maybe they do.
I mean, there are rumors that Arrow was stepping out. Those have been kind of debunked, but maybe they're scaling back.
Right. I mean, maybe that's it. I just, when you look at the cycle that McLaren has gone through over the last couple years in drivers, and they're basically went from Felix Rosenqvist to Nolan Siegel, and they lost patience with Felix Rosenqvist. How are they going to have the patience for Nolan Siegel? Because he's going to be learning all the rest of this year. He's going to be learning all of next year. The soonest you can look at Nolan Siegel as being a guy that can be a consistent contender is 2026. And is McLaren going to wait that long? I don't know. It's just very, very confusing. There's talk about Theo Pourchaire and his duties with Sauber F1, and maybe that's a reason why he can't commit. Who knows? But it's just not a good look for a team that continues to underperform as a whole in IndyCar. That's not up for debate. And then outside of backing into a win at St. Pete, has just 2 podiums, or 1 podium outside of that. Would have had 2 podiums, of course, at St. Pete. 1 St. Pete, 2nd place for Pato, of course, at the 500. Other than that, no podiums for this team.
And they went from a solid, consistent number 2 driver in Felix Rosenqvist back when they were a 2-car team, who got them 4 poles. Yes, he didn't win any races, but only the 5 cars won a race since McLaren took over Schmidt, Peterson, what it was previously known as, and took over in 2020 as the essential, the primary runner of that team. Only the 5 cars won races. And for all the hype, and look, they're great at marketing and selling merch and everything. But look, the reality is they've only had 1 of those 2 and now 3 entries that are true championship contenders in the lifetime of the team in this iteration in IndyCar. And only 1 driver that's won races. Now, they've had Felix win poles, but Rossi hasn't won any poles for them, right? No one else in the other entries won poles. So it's a lot. And I guess to me, these decisions almost feel like McLaren are grasping at straws here to try to find something that works. But will they give Siegel the time, right? Is he truly going to be given all of this season and all of next season to learn and grow before he hits the ground running in 2026?
That's not how McLaren operates. I think
and
a
if
lot
they're
of
not going to do that, then
what are we doing?
Yeah, what are we doing here?
I think a lot depends on that number 7 car. If they can get a second bullet in the chamber, so to speak, to be a contender up front with Pato Award, that would help a lot to say, okay, Nolan Siegel, you're fine to kind of grow. But overall, it's a puzzling move. Nolan Siegel's path to McLaren or a top team typically would go through Coyne.
Which
Ed
was
Carpenter.
where he was rumored to be
Right.
have a
Juncos.
deal for next season.
That's usually where these drivers are groomed and learn, and then they're signed coming out of one of those teams to a quote-unquote top 4 team. That's usually how it works. McLaren is taking the middleman out of it and is saying Nolan Siegel is our guy going forward. But man, oh man, I just I don't know if the kid's ready. I know he's not ready. And that's not to say he can't be the guy in the future, but those are usually worked out at other teams. Look at Joseph Newgarden, working it out with Sarah Fisher Hartman Racing and stuff. That's
Penske is well known for letting
outside of
drivers
Scott McLaughlin.
develop.
Exactly.
Well, and he was, a part of Penske's partnership in supercars, right?
Correct.
So Penske's lets drivers develop, and then they pick them up.
Are we seeing a fundamental shift within IndyCar to take, at the top teams, take paying drivers? Because we're seeing it at Chip Ganassi with Kiffin Simpson. We're maybe probably seeing it with Nolan Siegel at McLaren. Are we? I mean, you could even say Marcus Armstrong at Chip Ganassi Racing bringing money. Are we looking at McLaren as going, and that kind of where it ties into the Aero thing, whether Aero's going away or cutting back, is McLaren's going, okay, we need an influx of money. And we know McLaren is the most well-financed team in the entire paddock, but it still likes money. More money is better than the current money you have. And if Nolan Siegel's dad is saying, here's a check for $10 million to run my kid for all of 2025, is McLaren in a position to not say no? I wouldn't blame him if they don't.
That is the ultimate question in all of this. So that's the bulk of the silly season stuff. We'll have other notes, smaller news items on silly season stuff in news and notes coming up in a bit. Oh, and we've talked all about all of this stuff, and we have a race this weekend.
We do.
Firestone Grand Prix of Monterey at WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca, coming up this weekend. A look at the schedule for you, again, coming up on Friday. So we're recording this Thursday morning here in the U.S. And the schedule for Friday, practice 1 for IndyCar, Peacock IndyCar Live, SiriusXM IndyCar Radio, all these outlets throughout. But Friday, 5 to 6:15 Eastern. Practice 2 on Saturday is 1 to 2 Eastern. Then qualifying is 5:15 to 6:45 Eastern. And then race day on Sunday, 6 to 9 Eastern, Sunday evening, which is interesting because of the Pacific time zone, right? It makes sense, but also they're following NASCAR. So you have, I think, IMSA, Watkins Glen, you have NASCAR. Where's NASCAR at this weekend?
New Hampshire.
So NASCAR at New Hampshire, and then IndyCar following after that on USA and, of course, also on Peacock. So that is fascinating, should lead to a decent TV number.
Will it be a decent crowd?
6:15 or so is the green flag. Decent. I have no idea because it's all, you're on like viewing.
GA.
So
Yeah.
it's hard to tell.
Yeah, I do know that watching Sonoma, was it last week or the week before? I'm accustomed to seeing bare bleachers or those mounds, and they were packed with people watching the NASCAR race, and those cars are just so slow at Sonoma.
Yeah.
But that's a story for another day. But hopefully it's a good crowd at Laguna Seca. Take a shot every time they show the pass by Alex Zanardi. Was it 96?
Yeah. What's interesting, I mean, they moved this race way up, right? It used to be the season finale,
right,
and now it's earlier in the season. The weather, I mean, it's coastal, so like the highs are right around 70 degrees. It's going to be hotter here than it is out there, which is kind of hard for me to fathom. But
definitely.
There are two interesting things to me going into this weekend. One, this is the final race without the hybrid. That's the first interesting aspect. How does this play out? Number two, Honda's won all the races since they've come back here, starting in 2019. Obviously, they didn't have a race in 2020 due to the pandemic. So the way I look at this, I already know who I'm picking to win. It's Alex Palou.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his performance and won in 2022, 3 races for him at Laguna Seca, 3 podiums, a first, a second, and a third. And yes, he would seem to be the favorite. Colton Herta has won here twice, 2019 and 2021.
I expect Herta to qualify well, but he's qualified, the first 2 rows every race?
No, he's actually started 18th in 2022 and 12th last year.
Okay, so he fell off after dominating the first 2.
Fell off significantly. Scott Dixon won this race from 11th last year. That was his first win at Laguna Seca. So you look at Felix Rosenquist, who was on pole last year, got into trouble, finished 19th. But it's tough to overlook Alex Palou and his dominance at this track, albeit only 3 races, but I would not count out Will Power either. Hasn't won at Laguna Seca, but has a second, third, and a fourth.
So who's your pick?
Well, if you're going Alex Palou, I want to go Will Power, but I don't know if he wins back-to-back. I will go Joseph Newgarden.
Okay, so you're going with a Chevy. It's bold move.
I am. Yes, after Honda's won every race since the return.
All right. Well, if you agree or disagree with us, and I'm sure you will on some of our takes on all of these things we've discussed, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can always find us on the web, newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, you can see what we have in the store. We have t-shirts and stickers for you to check out. Also, you can sign up for the email list. It is free to subscribe. We'll send you emails for new episodes and any special announcements. You can sign up right at newtrackrecordpodcast.com. You can support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier and others for their support each month. You can also find us on social media, IndyCar Podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Just search for New Track Record. And you can always email us, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. If you send an email, you can guarantee pretty much an entry. If it's competent and coherent, you can pretty much guarantee an entry into the mailbag, which unfortunately we just simply don't have time for this week with everything going on.
We had a ton
IndyCar.
in the mailbag, at least through Twitter. It was an active week, so we appreciate everybody chiming in on Twitter.
And as always, you can listen in to us if you live in Fort Wayne, Saturday mornings, 8 to 9 a.m. on WELT 95.7 FM. Outside of Fort Wayne, of course, on your favorite podcasting platform. Free to download, listen, and subscribe. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, CastBox, Player FM, Pocket Casts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Again, all for free. News and notes time. And as we roll through kind of the final agenda items on this episode, so I mentioned other silly season notes. So Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing, they've always hinted right at that fourth car. More news from Racer.com. Yuri Vips, probably going to be the same package again this year. Wouldn't be a surprise to see him run like at Portland late in the season. In fact, he did that last year, did a couple races, so wouldn't shock me, and that's kind of where this looks to be trending. A couple races, and then it's up to Honda if they're able to run a fourth full-time entry next year.
Man, RLL going to 4 full-time entries next year, potentially. I don't know.
Vips is still on the payroll, so he's still with the team.
Yeah, he's still making money.
He's still doing some racing in Formula 2. So
yeah, he's raced in Formula 2 the last couple years. Hasn't, I don't think, made any starts yet this year.
Testing, it looks
Just
like.
testing. But won a race in Formula 2 last year. So, we don't know much about Vips in terms of his potential with IndyCar. He's only done, 2 races at the end of last year, Portland and Laguna Seca. It'd be nice to get him more starts, but where does he fit in, I guess? And that's what makes sense with a fourth car. And then I'm kind of looking at it going, for a team that has its fair share of issues, is it beneficial to be running 4? I'd say it's not beneficial to be running 3. But
yeah,
that's me.
We'll see.
In terms of performance,
Lundgaard's a free agent. Obviously, they're going to be keen to re-sign him, but who knows? Who knows who's the driver lineup for that team next year?
I mean, does Pietro Fittipaldi do enough the second half of the year to keep that seat for next year?
He did enough to keep 5 Hour Energy on for an extra race at Road America.
That's true.
Which was, hey, good if you can do it, right?
Yeah, well, sponsorships, I'd say half the battle, but it's more than half the battle at this point. But I think it'd be big if Fittipaldi can finish in the leader circle. He's 20th right now. So we'll see about that. Well, I think he's 22nd, actually, when you factor in just the car, not him.
Yeah.
So he's right on that cut line. That could be a big determining factor whether Fittipaldi's back next year. Maybe it's Fittipaldi out, Vips in for next season.
And we also we knew something was happening with Nolan Siegel because we were tipped off on this just by announcements that HMD Motorsports made for Indy Lights. Christian Brooks filling out the remainder of the season for one of their entries. Also will continue in USF Pro 2000. That was the first aspect. So you knew that Siegel had moved on, right?
Right.
That tipped us off that something had changed. Then the other aspect is Jagger Jones, grandson of the late now Parnelli Jones. He'll be back. He will be in the number 33 for HMD at Mid-Ohio. So good to see him get another shot at it for this year. Another aspect that we kind of jokingly talked about, well, here's the story. So Mark Miles says the potential for 3 to 4 race international series is a possibility. That a WIBC article, that's a radio station out of Indianapolis, hat tip to Matt Hickey for tipping us off to that. Look, as always, we're a believe it when we see it.
Yeah.
When it comes to that. Sounds great.
A lot of talk, a lot of bluster. We'll see.
Tire testing at Nashville. Drivers had good things to say. One other aspect, though, of this tire test at Nashville last week, Pato O'Ward reportedly crashed last Friday during testing.
And
he was seen and cleared, so cause yet to be determined.
Interesting, too, because the feedback from Nashville was, hey, it races, at least I think it was Will Power says races a lot of the similar, or maybe it was Scott Dixon, who had been there before.
Ed Carpenter said.
Was it Ed Carpenter?
He said the surface was better, and because of the concrete, the tires don't wear as much.
Yeah, so hopefully the feedback that drivers gave for both Milwaukee and Nashville can lead to a good enough tire compound to make A, passing available, and B, some fall off with the tires. I mean, I think those are the two keys when you look at ovals is can you pass, and is there deterioration with the tires?
And also talking about international races, Matt Hickey also tipped us off to this, to one of the outlets, I believe, in Argentina, but a report, Ricardo Juncos, was at the Autodromo Oscar Iwan Galvez, which is in Buenos Aires, evaluating the track there. That's where they did one of those demo runs, right, with Agustin Canapino a couple years ago. So that could be one of 3 events added next season in February or September.
Well, 2026, you mean?
Yeah, this says next season, but I would think 2026.
I would think so too.
Well, this would be a non-points paying thing. So, Brazil, Mexico also mentioned. Look, IndyCar, I'm begging you, please get a race, a points paying race in Mexico.
Or at least Texas. It's close enough.
Yes. And San Antonio would check that box, I guess, but I still think in Mexico would be an even bigger deal.
Totally. I mean, if there is a race that IndyCar should promote, if there's not a promoter that wants to do it, it should be in Mexico.
A couple other note items to get to. You talked a lot about this, but the 3 key stats from Chad 200 for Laguna Seca, forgot to get to that. Will Power finished 2nd, 3rd, 4th. Pole 23 laps led, never won. Herta won from pole his first 2 races, 11th and 23rd the last 2. And you mentioned it with Palou. 2nd, 1st, 3rd, and 3 starts, 118 laps led there. And a few other news items. Congrats to Kyle Kaiser, who got married earlier this week, former IndyCar driver for Juncos. Also, congrats to Marco Andretti. He and his fiance expecting a baby girl, which I think he announced he was engaged around the Indy 500. Is that right?
I can't remember. I don't know.
I believe so. It was very recent. So congrats to both of them. Is it Mura? Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Mura Micah Andretti. That's the name picked out. So baby girl coming soon. So congrats to both of them. Tweets of the week time. Boy, do we have a doozy for this segment. First off, from Simpson244. Notable because that's Brian Simpson, who used to run, what was the name? Was it Dream Digital? Basically it was the series that did Bus Bros. He was the guy behind the camera.
Gotcha.
He now has a different outlet that's called Stillhouse Company. Still involved with IndyCar and doing digital stuff. But he said, IndyCar fans, we need more races on network. I hate Peacock. IndyCar, got it. Here's a full network-based TV package with 19 windows per year you can watch for free. And also we got Indy Next on TV. IndyCar fans, but there's no streaming service like Peacock. And he said, there is. This from Alexander Rossi. After F1 made some headlines, Kimi Antonelli, who's 17, he now had the FIA's lowered the F1 super license age, paving the way for Antonelli to make his debut before he turns 18 should the opportunity arise. Rossi said, so exceptions can be made. Huh. And this from Nick Yeoman after Zach Brown back on June 4th sent to Theo Pourchaire, it is sad and pathetic. Theo, keep doing what you're doing, champ. And then Nick Yeoman said, just go do it somewhere else.
Yep.
And then you had the Scott McLaughlin, Tony Kanaan Twitter
fun.
beef. Scott McLaughlin said, let's take a moment of silence for all the trees sacrificed for McLaren contracts.
Which is that's a good crack.
Good opener. Then Kanan said, as a clapback, a shame push to pass didn't have a moment of silence in St. Pete. We can take one together if you like. And then McLaughlin with a sponsor plug.
Yes.
TK, if you're looking for beef, you won't find any better than Good Ranchers. I can send you a box this weekend. And then Kanan, not to be shortchanged, works in his own sponsor here, a longtime sponsor. I heard they sell those at 7-Eleven. Bring me some, mate.
Very good.
I don't think they do sell them at 7-Eleven, but good use of sponsors.
Back and forth.
And one other note on Tweets of the Week from Chip Ganassi Racing's team account. Sorry, we're still a bit jet-lagged from Le Mans. Did we miss anything? Yeah, you missed a lot.
Missed a lot.
And one other note item before we get to our random split error driver of the week. Wolfgang Monsieur, you probably know him on Twitter as I have two questions hashtag, suffered a heart attack / stroke. I've not heard any updates on the German journalist, but again, a lot of journalists in the paddock know, and they joke about the two questions, but they clearly this is a pretty serious situation. So wish him best of luck, and hopefully he can make a full recovery.
Great guy. When I covered IndyCar for a couple of years with the newspaper in Fort Wayne, always remember he was detail oriented with his questions, but very much loved for sure. So hopefully he's on the road to recovery.
All right, time for our random split error driver of the week.
You know, this isn't really a random split error driver of the week, but people that maybe didn't follow IndyCar or kart in the late 90s, early 2000s won't know. Galter Salas.
Ooh, I definitely know that one. What year are we focusing on for him?
Well, let's look at, as I just accidentally closed all of my windows here on my laptop. He was with several years, but we'll talk about 2003 for random split error driver of the week and Galter Salas. So as I bring it back up, a guy that raced multiple seasons in kart, 97 through 2000, and then came back in 2003 for Dale Coyne to do a partial season. I never knew that he had a start in IRL, but he did in 1999 at, of course, Walt Disney World. Finished 23rd. But in his races in kart over the course of 6 seasons, had like his top finish, his best finish was, interestingly, his last start in kart at Surfers Paradise in 2003, and was pretty crazy that his last start was his best start. But in 2003 for Dale Coyne Racing, raced in 9 events. His best finish was 6th. And just a storied story for Salas is he signed with Brian Stewart Racing to compete in Indy Lights in 1996 and won 3 straight races that year in Indy Lights, Portland, Cleveland, and Toronto, but fell late in the final 3 races and finished behind David Empringham.
Ah, yes, the Canadian.
Yes, and Tony Kanaan, who passed him that year, 1996, in Indy Lights down the stretch. He was then went up to IndyCars in the Kart World Series, newly founded Davis Racing. Do you know what I have no idea what Davis
Never heard
Racing
of Davis Racing.
And did 1 year with Davis Racing. It was an underfunded season, finished 7th at Laguna Seca, 10th at the Michigan 500. And then got onto Peyton Coyne Racing for a 6-race program, shared that ride with Dennis Vitolo. He finished 4th at Long Beach that season. So pretty impressive with what he was able to do with Peyton Coyne Racing, but that was later demoted down to 13th for whatever reason. I don't know why. But it's kind of a spot starts. Peyton Coyne Racing, 98, 99. Bettenhausen Racing raced at Rio de Janeiro for Bettenhaus. Went All-American Racers also in 1999, back to Coyne in 2000. Just a journeyman of a guy. But his best finish in kart was 6th at Surfers Paradise, his final race in kart, and then did the inaugural race for the Indy Racing League in 1999 at Walt Disney World Raceway.
23rd
23rd in that race.
TriStar Motorsports. You remember them? I don't.
I remember the name, basically because of Randa Split Era Drivers of the Week. That's pretty much the only reason why. Did some stock car racing in Stock Car Brazil in 2007. Did sports cars in 2001. Did the 24 Hours of Daytona, but will be known for his racing in both kart and one race in the IRL. Mr. Galter Salas, this week's Random Split Era Driver of the Week.
All right. Thanks to Adam Stern for joining us. For Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. We'll be back next week to recap the Firestone Grand Prix of Monterey here on New Track Record Podcast.